Vaughan Williams' setting of Over Hill, Over Dale from A Midsummer Night's Dream. I'm going to spend some time with people involved a little bit later, the actor Brian Demar Jones, but right now the director and actor Jeff Sanders. Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning.
And let's jump right in here. We've been here in relation to EWU theater things, where you're really involved and doing all kinds of stuff. But tell me about this collaboration of EWU Theater and Interplayers.
Well, it started about 2 years ago. Every summer, Eastern does a special actor training intensive where we bring in a Linklater teacher. Linklater is a voice methodology training for the actors. And she comes in from New York, and we decided to marry her technique with Shakespeare. And we wanted to do a showcase called Lovers and Madmen, in which we did scenes centered around lovers and madmen from Shakespeare's plays, and we did it at Interplayers Theater as a one-night-only special intensive performance. And we were really blown away by the response. A lot of people showed up to the play. We're really excited about having Shakespeare done in that space and in that moment. So the artistic director of Interplayers, Reed McCollum, said, what if this was a full-length production in the summer? And that hit me right in the sweet spot because I come from the Shakespeare professional world. And it's always been a dream of mine to do Shakespeare here in Spokane so that I'm not traveling somewhere else to do it, but here, right where I live. And so we just started tossing around titles, tossing around ideas, proposed it to the college, and amazingly enough, they supported us.
Nice. Well, how do you define a collaboration, kind of who does what and what is student, what is quote professional, and describe that?
It was a process. We put forth various ideas, and what we settled upon in terms of how we wanted to break it down was that it's easier for us at Eastern to cover artists, and it was easier for Interplayers to cover materials, publicity, space, and so we just did a 50-50 split right down the line. Midsummer Night's Dream, that title was brought forth for a couple of reasons. A, it is the great gateway drug of Shakespeare. People love that play, respond to that play, even some people that say they hate Shakespeare but love that play. It also divides well because I wanted to include Eastern students in the cast. So this is their first chance to do professional work with seasoned professionals like Brian here. And so I have students playing the young lovers. That hits them in their sweet spot, in their age range. They can play fairies. And so we have this beautiful hybrid production with national and regional professional actors working with my students.
And what about the casting? Did you do that? Did Reed do it in collaboration, or what of the principals?
I did the casting mostly under advisement with Michael Weaver, who was present at the time. Brian, who's here, I saw him at a theater festival in February, and I just said, that is Oberon, so I pursued him almost, like like someone trying to get a date or something. And it worked out,
Yeah. Good. And just quickly, a few of the other names that we know around here of folks who are some of the principals in this.
Sure. Well, Nick Witham is, a veteran of the Interplayers stage, and he's playing
At his
Puck.
tender young age.
At his tender young age. And he's playing Puck, and he does a fabulous job. His physical work on stage will be something the audience will enjoy very much. Patrick Treadway is playing Peter Quince, as well as the angry father of Hermia, Aegeus. And he, again, is always fabulous on stage, and he handles Shakespeare's text beautifully. We also have Gary Pierce, who's a veteran of the local stage. Brian Demar Jones here plays Oberon and Theseus. Sarah Goff, who's an assistant professor at Eastern, and my wife, is playing Titania and Hippolyta. So those are some of the local professional players.
Okay. Well, let's spend a little time with Brian. First, welcome back, Brian.
Thank you. Welcome.
And we spent time with you when you were doing speech and debate for Interplayers. Was that your one time to have been here, or have you done other things around here?
No, that was it.
Yeah. Okay. But you said you also briefly were working in Moscow in recent years.
After that production, wonderful life changes happened, and I decided I wanted to try to pursue some directing at the University of Idaho. And I did that for a year, and then I decided that I didn't want to pursue a directing degree since I already had a master's degree in acting. So I'm very grateful to that program. Learned a ton of things about myself as an artist. Then I headed out to Portland, which is where I reside now. And in between that and here, I was part of the Orchard Project, which is in Hunter, New York, in the Catskills. I was 5 weeks in the Catskills in the summer.
So
Enough said.
describe your work in that you do what, probably the greatest percentage of your work in Portland, but then get whatever gigs on the road you can? How do you put together a living?
How do I put together a living as an actor? Barely.
Of course.
Well, yeah, Portland is primarily where I get a lot of my work. It's a very, very giving city and a very wonderful city for new artists. I had been there for 5 days, had 3 auditions, and booked 2 of them. So it's that kind of wonderful environment for professional theater. And yeah, I'll get gigs from. I've primarily been working in the Pacific Northwest and in inland Northwest as well. There's a lot of theater festivals that happen in the summertime. So then during the year, I'll probably work in whatever city I'm living in, which is Portland, and I'll have a part-time job as well.
So the trick in the summer is really getting them all scheduled and booked so that by 3 days of overlap, you're not prevented from doing something. That's tricky. Yeah,
that was the ideal when I was 21. Now I'm tired, and it's exhausting to do that much traveling, honestly.
Sure.
But it's when you're there and you're working on a piece that you want to be working on, or that is just absolutely fun, then it's completely worth it, of course.
So speaking of pieces that are absolutely fun, have you done Oberon before?
No. I was one of those people who actually didn't like Midsummer Night's Dream for a while, until I saw a great production, and then I got to actually be in this production, and I realized how much ridiculous fun it is, and how much the language is absolutely beautiful. So the opportunity to play Oberon, the language of Oberon is extremely luscious and very vivid and poetic, and I have the pleasure of speaking it every night. So
nice. And so, talk a little bit about who is Oberon. What is Oberon's character? What's Oberon's personality as you're inhabiting him?
Well, he is the king of the fairies, and He's very jealous of a changeling child that Titania has, and I feel as if Oberon is trying to play a major trick, and it just goes completely awry, and then he feels like, oh gosh, I didn't mean for this to happen. I'm going to try my best to make things right again, both with the world in which he sort of puts into chaos, as well as with his own queen, and that's a good kind of sum of it. I think Oberon is very powerful, very sensitive, and eloquent. Maybe another great word.
So now that you've set him up completely, let's embarrass you and ask Jeff that when you met Brian, when you saw Brian's work, why did he click for you as Oberon in your mind's eye?
Well, when you see Brian on stage, it's he carries a lot of presence, and stage presence is something I don't know if you can teach it. There's just an essence about a person that radiates off the stage that you're drawn to them. And for me, Oberon, that's an essential quality of Oberon's character in our response to him. Mm-hmm. His text is all the things Brian said. It's also just beautifully sensual text that you want to just radiate towards it, and he had that quality. He had and I had not seen him do Shakespeare before, so he was doing contemporary work and musical theater work. But there's something about an actor that through the years that I've, having worked on enough of these plays, that I can sense pretty well whether they might have a facility for heightened text, and I just, without knowing Brian's background or resume, I just sensed that it was there. So he had those key elements. He knew how to use language. He had a presence on stage. So that's something that our audience, I think, will really respond to. And it's stature, physical stature, I think is really key for Oberon. That's kind of interesting because Titania is almost the exact opposite physical stature. My wife is not 6'3", but she has it. She has it the reverse stature, but in spades. So she's very, low to the ground and strong. So it's this beautiful dichotomy where most people are saying, "Wow, which such physical opposites they are," and I said, "Yes," and that's what we'll love about it.
I know how that works.
They have equal power, but in the opposite ways. Yeah.
Speaking with Jeff Sanders, who's directing and, parenthetically, bottom in Midsummer Night's Dream, and Brian Demar Jones, who is Oberon for this production of Midsummer Night's Dream. It opens this Thursday night, and it runs through the following Sunday, and it's a pretty easy formula because it's Thursday, Friday, Saturday night, and then Saturday and Sunday matinees, and then next week it begins on Wednesday and runs Wednesday through Sunday, with Wednesday through Saturday night at 7:30, and then the two matinees on Saturday and Sunday at 2 at Interplayers. Okay, now let's get deeper into Midsummer Night's Dream, because Jeff, you mentioned that you did it 11 years ago and that you have a strong Shakespeare affinity. So talk about going around again, and I assume this is your first time to direct Midsummer Night's Dream, or is it not?
It's actually my third time directing it.
Okay.
But, what's interesting about this go-around is that, and this is the great pleasure of working on these plays for an artist, is that they're, much like Bottom's Dream, he says, hath no bottom, which is a great wordplay on his name. Shakespeare's works, in the similar way, don't really have a bottom. They deal with these universal human themes that as you, as an artist and as a person, a human being, grow in your life experience, the plays continue to blossom and open up to you in new ways that you didn't expect. You see new things behind the curtain that you didn't see before. So coming back to A Midsummer Night's Dream and having a lot of experience with the play, a fundamental question for me was, what's connecting me to this piece again this time? And it was interesting because there's a lot of things in my life that had changed, my wife and I became parents, so I understood the relationship with the changeling and Oberon and Titania in a way that I had never understood it before completely. I intellectually understood it, but now I emotionally understand it. And just other various things that personalized the work to me in a much deeper way than they were in the past. In the past, it was a fun play. I once did like this punk rock fairy world, which was a great show, and we had a blast with it. But now for me, the show is about it's funny, and it will be whimsical and magical like you expect from Midsummer, but it also has a soul, and that's what I was really wanting to get in touch with.
What are the traps of Shakespeare relative to people who have been to 23 productions of it in their lives, and kind of like classical people who hearing their 23rd Beethoven Ninth Symphony or something like that? Do you feel you have to win over people in a certain way or deal with their preconceptions?
That is partly. I mean, I always like immediately surprising the audience in situations like this, so that maybe they do have an expectation and immediately give them something they would never expect. And that happens in this production from moment one. I think you will walk in expecting one thing, and boom, you're going to be surprised in an interesting way. I wasn't trying to do that just because, ooh, look at the little trick I played. It was truthfully coming out of my connection to the piece. I don't want to say too much about it because it gives away the surprise. But so that's one end. Yes, I mean, that was good. But Shakespeare to me is like sheet music. You know, the language itself, when you read it, is just notes on a page. It's what the artist does with their interpretation of that music. So what has never happened before is you have never seen Brian play Oberon here in Spokane and see what he does with this language and this character, or Nick Witham, or Patrick Treadway, or myself. And so it's like jazz. You know, the basic structure, yes, is there, but wait till you hear a great artist play with it, because how we play with it is what makes it individual, unique, and surprising.
And speaking of music, what's outside of Shakespeare's words when you put on a production? Are you involved with dance, with music? What's there beyond the words?
Well, I brought in Carolyn Jess, who is a very busy music director here in town, to do some original music for us, because there's moments of music in the play. And so you get to hear a little bit of Brian singing during the show and stuff. Also, I brought I actually used one of my students to help me with some of the choreography. There's some fairy dances and roundels and stuff within the play. So, you know, Shakespeare in some ways is similar to working on a musical. You know, you're juggling a lot of different balls at once. So all those things are in there as well. And one thing I would also point out, or just to excite our audience listening out there, I know you're there, is the lighting of this show is gorgeous. Shanna Joslin, who's also an Eastern faculty member, has done the lighting design and the scene design. And she does a beautiful job of creating that moonlit forest. So I think that's another reason to step into that theater, because you're going to see Interplayers lit in a way that maybe you've not seen it before.
Yeah. And what about the thrust stage? What are the pros and cons of that for this production?
Great question. Well, first off, I have to teach students how to work on a thrust stage, which has been interesting because they're used to our proscenium stage. So what a great learning experience. So, you know, I try to move around the house, making sure I can see things from different angles. Space is key. So, you know, we can't get too on top of each other, or else we're excluding 2/3 of the house. But I think ultimately what is really great about the Interplayers stage is you know, sometimes we think of Shakespeare as something distant and, you know, far away on stage with a big fat man in tights bombasting verse. What this show is it's incredibly intimate. You know, you're right in the lap of this show and in this performance. And I try to use that so that when a character has a soliloquy, you can feel the actor's eyes on you, speaking to you, as opposed to like a big black void. You know what I mean? And I think that's why these plays were written to be performed in sunlight, so that connection was there. So although we're having lighting, that connection, I think, retains itself at Interplayers.
Yeah. And Brian, for you too, I assume you've worked on thrust. Well, of course, you did speech and debate on that very stage. Is this working okay to use that stage that way?
Oh yes. Just what Jeff was talking about in regards to being able to share with the audience. I have many moments that I get to share with the audience, both in soliloquy and in response to other characters. That's one of my favorite things, as for me personally as an actor. I remember the first time anyone said, working on a proscenium stage, it's like they're like, don't look at the audience while you're doing this moment, just look over their heads. And I was scared to look over their heads. I wanted to engage with the audience. So one of the biggest pleasures to come back and work at Interplayers, for me, I remember asking, I don't know if I asked Jeff early on, I said, where are we doing the play? Because that's a big factor. Are we doing it at EWU or are we doing it at Interplayers? I've never been to EWU, but I knew I wanted to go back to the Interplayers stage for that intimate sharing with the audience reason. And
you just answered something I've always wondered. You know, when I am sitting there in the audience and the actor is looking at me, are they seeing me, or are they looking over my head? And
I think there used to be a tradition where you look at at least when I was growing up and working in high school and whatnot, and then in college, where they would tell you to look at the clock in the back of the room because it looks like you're looking at the audience. But I never did that. And I noticed, too, that professional actors, like at the Oregon Shakes or the professional shows that I've seen where they have a direct address to the audience, they're looking directly at me.
Sure.
They're engaging me. And I think that is some either weird tradition that I came from of not looking at the audience but over their heads. Or if that is some old tradition from long ago, I don't know. But direct address is, for me, the way to get the audience engaged in the play.
I can say this because we're on a radio, not in a theater, but I was once doing a production of Macbeth, and I was playing Macbeth, and there was a 10-year-old boy sitting in the front row, and Macbeth comes out with blood on his hands, and he asks a very simple question. He says, "Will all great Neptune's ocean wash this blood clean from my hand?" And this little boy, I was looking right at him, looks at me straight in the eye and says, "No." And I thought, for me, that was a zeitgeist moment in Shakespeare performance, that it really asks the question, engage the audience member, and they might actually respond, and then that creates a moment that can only exist in that time and space. And I hope that's why we go to the theater, is that uniqueness of this one night only event, that's unique to that night. And Shakespeare is beautiful about presenting those opportunities if you really engage it.
So roughly a dozen of these moments come along beginning tomorrow night, Thursday the 7th at 7:30, and then on through the following weekend through the 17th, and all the usual Interplayers ways to connect. The old-fashioned way of saying it was 455 PLAY. They've gotten really cool and said 455-7529, but either way, and certainly to Google it and go online and get tickets to Interplayers and all of that stuff. So thank you so much, Jeff Sanders.
Thank
Great
you.
to see you again. And Brian, welcome back. Really wonderful to have you in our community.
Good to be here.